I can't believe I made it to 10 episodes. It's been 6 months and your support has been incredible, so thank you. And there will be more gratitude in this episode. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's not the one for you. The irony of the whole thing is that this kind of idea I concocted to force myself to get my cars done has seriously started to eat into the time that I have to get my cars done. But I've realized that I'm so much further forward than I would have been had I not done this, and life is the richer for it. So yeah, I'm all in. Now, these are the Glengarry leads, and you don't get them. They're actually the ticket stubs to Mondello Park, and I'm ashamed to say that 3 of them are over 20 years old, but this one is new. I went last weekend as the guest of Jason Lockery and Steve Griffin, who together are Classic Car Restorations Limited, and I went to get kind of credible external witnesses, let's put it that way, to the Griffin story. I ended up having a great day, meeting great people. I've got an interview with Leo Nulty, he's the commentator at Mondello Park. I have seen some great cars, some great racing, and that is all to come. But without further ado, here's the Esprit. So the headlamps remain a little bit of a problem, and I decided to get on with other things, starting with the aerial. I kind of thought I might put a grommet in the circular hole that this was mounted in, but it turns out it's not circular, and I think the best thing to do is just fill this anyway because the aerial is not going back in, but that's another story. So into the wiper motor, and there's a few places that the wiper system has to be released. Underneath the windscreen where it's also holding the blower cowl, and obviously back over at the motor itself, which I released, and then I went outside the car to release the little gear drive and the arm itself, of course, and out everything came. It's in great nick. I haven't tested it, of course, I don't know if it works, but it's in good nick. And as always, all the little bits go back in the order they came off, so that later on when I go to tackle this and refurbish it, I know what's what. I'm finally ready to get at this pedal box. And then I remembered that another Esprit owner had told me how difficult it is to get to the bolts that hold in the pedal box. So I decided to give myself the best chance and take the dash rail out first. There was nothing left on it except the bolts that hold it in and the little clasps that hold the latching mechanism for the bonnet. So off they came, and when I went to pull out the dash rail, it wasn't really budging. And I realized that that little seized screw that was holding down the top fiberglass of the dash was still in there and causing me trouble. And I tried a few ways of getting this thing out, and then it dawned on me, hey, it's probably not gripping by thread, it's probably just gripping by friction. So that was the case, and off that came. And out came the dash rail. There was very little rust on this rail, and I think that this may not be a crash structure. Now, I'm not going to do anything until I know for sure. I'm going to try and ask the right people and find out categorically whether it's just to reinforce the door post and give the dash something to bolt to, or whether it is actually part of the crash structure of the car. Because if it isn't, it's too heavy. Now, about that bonnet latching mechanism, it's just a tube with some thread in the end and a bolt going into it. It could be just a hollow tube with a bar going into it, but that would rattle, and that wouldn't feel nearly as nice to operate. This is, I thought, just a really nice piece of simple engineering that's very, very effective. It still could be lighter though. So the bolts came out of the pedal box, well, 3 of the 4 of them did very easily, but the 4th, the near side rear one, it was just too tight in there. I couldn't get a socket onto it, and guess what? My 1/2-inch spanner is broken. So I kept stripping, decided to take the blower cowling out and the blower motor. That way I could get to it from the front of the car, which is what I did. I hammered a socket onto it and out it came. And finally, after all of this, out came the pedal box. And here is the type of economy of production you get on cars. This pedal box is heavy, and I mean, it's not crazy heavy, but it's way heavier than it needs to be. You see a lot of aluminium pedal boxes on race cars. That's totally doable. But we'll see what we can do here first. Maybe this can be lightened and we'll keep the original one in it. And that's really all there is for the Esprit in this episode. I tried my best to get back in a few times to get some more footage, but there's just so much going on, I couldn't do it. The next time there will be a little bit of Esprit, but I think it will be tiny. I think it's just the front bumper, the light pods, a few tiny little bits and pieces that are giving me trouble. So, on we go. We are so close to this transition in the series where the Esprit gets temporarily shelved. That is to come. Now I want to talk to you quickly about the people who have gotten in touch in the last 2 weeks to kind of share the excitement of getting back to work on their cars. So the first two are both named Andreas. They're both from Germany and they both have cars that are almost identical in colour. Andreas Aaron is a student who has a Datsun 510, here it is, and he had fallen into the trap of not thinking there was anything he could do without any money, and he has gone to work on his car, so keep it up, Andreas. Andreas from Wolfsburg has a 73 911T. He's doing a full restoration, so keep us in tune with what's going on, Andreas. We'd like to see where this goes. Vic Cooper and his daughter got in touch from the States. They are Lotus people. Vic seems to be very hands-on and very experienced. He's already sent me some great tips. Here's his 65 drop head Elan, and this is his S2 Esprit. It's a Series 2. It's wearing a Series 3 bumper, which is why it looks slightly different, but I think it's kind of a cool look. Thanks a million, Vic, for getting in touch. Nick Robertshaw from Australia. I know Nick as a Landy guy, but he sent me photos of his 58 FC Holden Special, and I think this is so cool. I kind of like 50 stuff. It's got a bit of rockabilly going on, so I would love to see where this goes as well, Nick. Keep in touch, mate. Greg is my sponsor, and he's just bought this black MGB GT, and he's bought this is the coolest thing. He's bought it so that he can learn how to do some mechanical stuff, and he's already done his first alternator belt. So Greg, keep it up, mate. Don't make me explain to you again that you're not eligible for the Valet Pro kit. But the guy I do want to send it to is a guy called Seth Fawcett, and I don't want to do what he said at this service, so I'm going to read it to you. So he says, a few years ago, my 1984 VW Rabbit, that's the American Golf GTI, developed a minor fuel leak. As it turns out, that project turned massive, involving a suspension and brake overhaul on all four corners, and when I went to bleed the system, the master cylinder sprung a leak. I gave up. It's been sitting out there for 3 years taunting me. I finally went out there today and got back to work on it. The new booster is mounted. The brake lines and hoses are going in. That's the stuff. That's the cool stuff. You know, Seth, this kit is on its way to you. I hope you enjoy it, mate. Get the car finished, get it out there. And you know, the other thing that Seth sent me is a picture of his Buick Roadmaster. I kind of felt like maybe I should give him this Valet Pro kit because this car just looks like it's got a shovel and a bag of quicklime in the boot. But the other thing is his MGB GT, and I'm not into kind of personalised regs. They're a bit of fun though, but this one is the kind of most tongue-in-cheek one I've ever seen. So fair play to you, Seth. Now, with all that said, here's the Range Rover. This time we're going to tackle the lip of the arch on the offside rear. So you can see here there's a big gap. This is the gap we're going to fill. And the saving grace here is that all being well, all being correct, we should be able to use the same template that I cut from the other side of the car to make this panel. Now it's a flat panel, but it's quite long and it's got a big curve, which isn't that easy to cut out with an angle grinder, but you do it slowly, you do it in little sections, you get it out no problem. So here it is. And I've left plenty of extra meat on this because it's better to have too much, as I said before, than too little. Too little means you'd have to start all over again, whereas too much can be pared back. So after cutting it out, I can knock off all the little kind of sharp edges and the burrs and stuff, and then we can start test fitting it. Now, testing like this, you know, this isn't real time. There was a quick jump there because this just takes time. All of this takes time. It's never going to be exactly the same, so there's little marks to be made and little cuts to be made and grinds and just peeling it back bit by bit so that it's a perfect fit. So all I'm doing here is marking it up so I can take it back and shave it down. And by the way, you can see that this metal, I mean, it's been sitting here for months, but it's starting to rust just from the moisture in the air. This panel on the inner arch that you see here is starting to look like the bit that I took out in the first place, which kind of, if I let it go too much further, there won't have been much point. Anyway, test fitting the new arch lip and it's looking really good. So this is just a case of bringing the ethos of measuring twice and cutting once into play at every stage in this. You know, just keep on going back, measuring. That's what I tell myself. So the first tacks go in at the bottom, and this is just so that I can get rid of all these clamps and, you know, weld it for real. And then I can make some adjustments. You see it's going to sit in, there we go. And then the tack can go in at the top. I can get rid of all the vice grips and clamps. These clamps, by the way, I never talked about those when I talked about my tools. That's because I forgot about them. They were, I think, €2, maybe 3 each. So they were really, really affordable. They're called F clamps. They come in all different sizes. You'll find them if you look for them. So off the outer arch comes, and we have a lip. Now, there are tooling marks on this outer arch. You see them here. This is from where I think the metal was gripped by the press when the arch was being pressed. So I zipped those off because they were holding the arch off the lip. When I got it back on, I realized I'd gone a bit too heavily on the welding at the bottom tack, and a weld had run out the outside. You see it here, and it's holding the arch off just the same. So the arch has to come off again, and then we can grind that back. This just goes to prove the value of just always checking, going back and checking before you go too far. So hopefully one final time for a test fit of the outer arch, and clamp it back up. And there was a few little adjustments to be made here, just some slight easing of these panels to get them in check. And the tacks can begin on the inside of this new lip. Now, over the course of what you've seen, over the course of the episode so far, the welding has always been a bugbear of mine. You can start to see here in real time the method I'm using now. I've gotten considerably better, and you can see there's almost fish scales happening here. I'm using a higher heat and slowing down to keep the heat at bay, because the heat will end up just blowing through the metal if everything gets too hot. So I'm much happier with these welds. Now we're going to have a lot more time to spend in the Range Rover, so next time expect a lot of progress. And I shouldn't say that because I'm probably tempting fate, but there you go. Okay, time for the story about my trip to Mondello. But before we go into it, I got to thinking, how does an Irish racing park have a very Italian sounding name? Well, it turns out that Mondello is a Sicilian thing. And given that we have our very own in-house Sicilian, here's Annalisa to tell us how Mondello Park got its name. Mondello. Only joking. Annalisa couldn't make it, last minute thing, so you're stuck with me. Now it turns out Mondello Park was founded by 3 guys, Jim Moran, Eddie Regan and Stuart Cosgrove, who used their initials to form their company Motor Racing Circuits, or MRC. But Moran had honeymooned in Sicily and fell in love with a spot called Mondello, which, as Annalisa tells me, is a very close beach to Palermo. But so much so that he, when he came home, named his house Mondello Lodge. And later, when the circuit was built, literally in the back garden, it inherited the name. Simple as that. I arrived down to the Mondello Park with the sole intention of meeting new people, people who I could interview and who could give me parts of the Griffin story from an impartial, unbiased viewpoint. What actually happened was I got completely enthralled by the paradox between Steve Griffin, the lovely, genial, affable guy,
Lewis Hamilton put this on much easier than me,
to Steve Griffin, the eye of the tiger kind of guy behind the wheel of a race car. So I was from pillar to post trying to get words from Leo Nolte, his commentary and some interview, and getting shots of Steve racing. So here's a little bit of both, and then we'll have a chat with Leo.
Pretty much every decade, and he's on pole position today in the little Modsport MG Midget in the HRCA race. Stevie Griffin makes no allowances for age and oodles of talent, a charming man as well, but he will be very hard to beat, I think, this afternoon. 103.720 is lap time in the little MG Midget.
5-second board is up.
Waiting for the red lights to come on the BMW bridge. The lights are on. They're out quickly and away to go. Steve Griffin nails the start with the TMC. Costin gets a run. Almost contact on the way down to turn 1. And the shovel nose of the TMC, almost giving Stevie a little bit of help on the way down towards Mobile 1 corner. Can he hang on to it? He can. He's late on the brakes and Steve Griffin takes it. So it's Griffin leads from Thompson second place, Tommy Doherty third, Jack Kinston, Clive Brandon, then Will Curry, then Liam Root. Watch out for 17 Will Curry in that red midget. We'll know straight away what kind of speed it has in a straight line. So Steve Griffin leads, but only just. He's under big pressure. Val Thompson in the 1600cc, more modern car with more power, the Z-Tech engined, or Duratec possibly. Checkered flag is being prepared. Remember, this guy won races in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even last year at Mondello Park, and he's going to win another one this year. Mondello legend Steve Griffin comes down to take the checkered flag, complete another dominance. Give him a round of applause in the grandstand. Great stuff from Steve Griffin in the little Modsport MG Midget. His first win was 1968 and he's still winning at Mondello Park. And 2 wins one day, not a bad day for Stevie Griffin in the Modsport Midget. So great stuff. We'll have to wait a while, I think, before the second place finisher arrives back.
My name is Leon Ulti. I'm the commentator at Mondello Park for about the last probably 20 years. Raced here during that and before that for many, many years. And before that again, I would have been in the grandstand over there with my dad since I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I started off racing karts, and then I went to racing Mondello and Formula V's, then I raced Fiat Unos, Fiat Ritmos, Fiat Puntos, Fiat Punto Abarths, Historics. I did an Irish touring car race, raced a Formula Shane single-seater. So pretty much, not every class, but a lot of classes. I love the sport, and commentary I suppose is a bit like methadone for me, isn't it? You know, I can get the buzz but I'm still involved. Could I sit in the grandstand as a spectator? I'm not so sure. That'd be difficult enough to do. I took my racing probably more seriously than I would have liked. I got very competitive, and it's not that much fun when you're not winning. I remember seeing 2 guys getting out of a car and embracing one day, and they finished 14th and I was second, and they were happier than I was because I hadn't won the race, and I thought there's something wrong here, you know. No, well, I suppose I raced saloon cars in the Puntos, and there was a lot of contact in that by the nature of it, you know, so there was always a little bit of drama there, but I made some very good friends as well. No, I don't think it's what stopped me. It's a very expensive sport. It's very difficult to do correctly, and then I actually bought a couple of cars in a truck, and I had a team for a while running a couple of Formula V's with a mechanic working for me, and then I got into commentary, and then I became a journalist, and I was writing for UK magazines. I still do. I'm still the correspondent for Autosport and for Motorsport News. So as I said, that kind of kept me involved without having to spend every penny and a little bit more that I had. It's not a cheap sport. It's well worth it, but it's a great sport, and one thing it doesn't champion is the fact that there's a community of people there, like there would be in a golf club or a rugby club, and we don't admit it, but we'd help each other if we were stuck, you know. No, not really. I mean, I've been known to come down here on a test day and wander off down to the back of the track, which is not really used as that was an access road. When I was here years ago with Dad, you could drive around, spectators could. Now it's all overgrown. It's a 4x4 course. But you might find me out there the odd Saturday just watching a bit of testing to see what's what. From the top of the tower up here, you don't really see the cars performing, and it's down beside the track. You see some guys that I mightn't notice mid-grade, and they're really good, but the car mightn't be up to it and they're really having a go, and it's great to be able to do that. But I think it's just the love of the sport, really. I think if I do that every so often, you know, you kind of tend to know, and you know most of the drivers. It's generally the same guys that come here, you know. It's a hobby for them, so it's the same guys in each class. You will get new guys, and you get new guys that you'll notice that are pretty quick straight away. But the thing about the sport is no matter how good you are, the car has to be good. You've got to have a good team behind you. You've got to have good mechanics. And it took me a while to learn that. You know, you think you're going to arrive down and jump into a car and beat everybody at Mondello Park. It doesn't happen. Yeah, that's what everybody thinks, yeah. I mean, but no matter how good you are, you need a really good team behind you. You need somebody to set the car up. You need to be able to bring feedback back to them and tell them what the car is doing, and they can react to that. If you don't do that, you're not going to win. When I was young, very young, there was a guy called Vivian Candy. He was like the Irish James Hunt, and he was sponsored by Marlboro, and he was a big playboy, and he was always down here with women and, you know, coaches before his time. And he raced a Hillman Imp that was built by David Hall, the Hall Speed Imp it was known as. And I bought back what I suspect might be that car, and we rebuilt it, and I brought it back and managed to win in it here at Mondello. And that was just, even driving out the pit lane in that car was incredible for me, because when that car arrived, it was a highly modified car, and it was like a Formula 1 car the first day it arrived in Mondello in the 70s here. So I probably had more fun in that car, and by that stage I'd given up any aspirations of, you pick your odd race and you go and actually have fun. Whereas if you're racing in a championship, every day matters. Every test day, he's got new tyres, he's just had his engine rebuilt. You know, it actually matters. Whereas if you just come down for a little bit of fun, it's a much more enjoyable day. Well, there were 14 of them built, 4 of them written off, and there were 8 or 9 accounted for. But I actually have a second one. So I have 2 of the 8 or 9 that are left. And we thought the original one might be the Irish car, we're not sure. The second one, another guy had a look at, there were no chassis plates on them. So we're not sure, to be honest. But in my head I didn't care. I put back on the Marlboro stickers and all the way it was Captain America's who used to sponsor the car back in the day. It's all stickered up the same way again.
Professionalism out the window. Captain America's woo!
Well, it ties up to the Imp story because I remember Steve Griffin would have been the man in Minis down here, in the Smarties Mini, and pretty much unbeatable until that Imp arrived. And the Minis that Steve and these guys raced were still pretty much related to a road car. Highly modified engines, 13-inch wheels, fiberglass fronts, but they were heavy. So the Imp just made them all redundant when it arrived. It beat them significantly. It was a lot quicker than all of the Minis. And I remember one day there was a shed. People have contradicted me, but on the opposite the start finish line, there was a big shed over there, and I think it was called Speedy's Burger Joint. This is back in the 70s, and the rain came down really, really, really heavily, and everybody ran in there for cover, and so did we. But I ran back out, and Steve Griffin had caught the Imp, and there was this incredible battle between the two of them because it was wet, and nobody had beaten the car before. And I don't remember who won the race. That's my first memory at Mondello Park. Most of the guys that raced in the 60s and 70s in Mondello, you'd see them around, but you'd see them in the grandstand, you know, or you'd see them knocking around the paddock having a bit of fun. But Steve is still competitive. Like I remember when he came out in that midget that he's racing today, first against me in the Imp in a historic race, and I just couldn't believe how smooth he was, how quick he was. You're expecting a 17-year-old guy to jump out of the car, you know. He's incredibly quick. He's very relaxed in life. He's a lovely man. He speaks slowly. He's utterly charming. He's very helpful, but he can drive a race car still. Well, he hung him up a few times before. He was able to come back. Yeah, I mean, Steve didn't race from, I would say, 86, 87 maybe, certainly late 80s until 93 when the Fiat Uno Cup came back, a manufacturer-backed race. And Fiat backed it and there was a lot of money involved. You actually got £100 start money, everybody on the grid did. And Steve went back, as he said to me at the time, eating rabbit food and walking in the evenings, and he lost a load of weight and he came back and he won that championship against, again, hadn't raced in years, but straight back out there, you know. Well, the weight on the cars, yeah, he'll tell you. I mean, Steve knows, but he's a really good race engineer, you know. He's really, really good at twiddling and tuning, and you know, all through he won races in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s and the 90s in Mondello Park, but he didn't win any in the noughties, and that's not because he was sitting in an armchair. He ran one of the best motorsport teams down here. His drivers won the Uno Championship, they won the Punto Championship, did a lot of championships, Irish touring cars. He would have run cars, and he was helping those drivers in terms of technique, mentally, and of course twiddling with the cars all the time, you know, setting them up. He did win the Sexton Trophy, yeah, which is at the time was a hard fought for trophy that was open to any car in any class, so it would have been very difficult. You know, if you won your class all the time and were beaten once or twice, you probably couldn't win it because somebody in another class would have been dominant all year. So that kept the pressure on drivers all year. It was very difficult. Winning your own championship wasn't enough, you know. No, I didn't. No. I never really had successful championship campaigns. I won races. I won quite a few races, thankfully, in the sport that I love, but I never won a championship. Won a karting championship, but not a car one. That's it, yeah. I go back the odd time, and I think that's why I do it, just so I don't look like an old fogey at the top of the tower, you know. Most cars race in their national colours, internationally, and that's where British racing green comes from. That it was borrowed. It's a long story we could go into for ages, but German cars were white, French cars were blue, UK cars were green, and eventually Colin Chapman from Lotus got sponsorship from a cigarette company, from Gold Leaf, and that became an iconic colour scheme, half red, half white. There's a Lotus racing here today with that colour scheme on it. Gold Leaf were the first commercial sponsorship on any car, any racing car. But around the same time, well, a little bit later perhaps, Steve Griffin got a bit of sponsorship from Roundtree Macintosh, who are now Nestle, I think, and they would have had Smarties as one of their brands. So you weren't allowed to put commercial branding on a racing car, so he went to the RAC and approached them. And apparently there was a little bit of discussion, and he was eventually allowed to put a sticker about the size of an A4 sheet on the quarter panels on the sides of the Mini, but they counteracted this by putting coloured Smarties all over the whole car. So I actually remember that car racing here. It was iconic. Everybody remembers it. It's Steve Griffin, he'll tell you himself. Everybody remembers it was the man that drove the Smarties Mini. And Roundtree Macintosh used to send down 2 Volkswagen vans with promotional staff in them, sign written up like the Mini, and they'd be giving out packets of Smarties. And you know, the fact that we're talking about it here 40 years later, he was a pioneer of sponsorship as well as many other things in motor racing. The fact that the sport isn't in a particularly good shape is probably not something we should be talking about at the moment, but it's struggling, you know.
Why?
Well, the last time Mondello Park was packed for a club race meeting, I think there was probably only 2 channels on the telly and there was no shops open in the country, you know. Now lately the management are doing really well and they're pushing it really hard. They're doing promotional videos and they're putting clips up and getting social media, which is where it needs to be. But most people will tell you that their kids don't want to come to a sporting venue anymore on a Sunday. They want to go to Blanchardstown, or they want to go to Dundrum, or they want to go somewhere where they've got Wi-Fi and they can swipe. Yeah, so you know, that's probably the next step here, to be Wi-Fi all around the paddock. There is certain Wi-Fi in certain places, you know, but it needs to be made sexier again. That's not a particular Mondello issue. That's an issue in motorsport everywhere, you know. And again, everything's on demand now, isn't it? People don't sit in at 7:30 to watch Coronation Street, even they watch it when they want to watch it, you know. So life has changed. Motorsport.ie, yeah. That's my website. I set that up in 2012. It's the biggest motorsport website in Ireland. So we won the blog awards last year, won the best sports blog last year. We've just been nominated for it again this year, and also for blog post of the year for a blog that I did. So interesting times. That was about a trip I did with my dad. Actually, Dad has a Mercedes, an SL Mercedes, and we took it to the Aran Islands with 14 other guys. We chartered a boat and took 14 classic cars to the Aran Islands for 4 days. Great fun over there, and then we went to Brooklands straight after that, and we entered the driving test on the banking in Brooklands. We somehow won it in the Merc, you know, so we got a big trophy. So I'm tempted to get a t-shirt with my dad won at Brooklands. Yeah, funny. Yeah, there always, but I think it would probably have to be something historic and more relaxed. I don't know. I'd love the idea of testing again. Would I want to go racing again? I don't know. I'm very hard on myself whenever, like anyone is, when they race. So I possibly, yeah. I sometimes on a Sunday evening when I go home, I find myself going on to Dundee or eBay starting to look for racing cars. I still have a few. I still have 4 or 5 racing cars. So I don't know. I manage a few young racing drivers now and do their PR and stuff like that. So I suppose in some ways, although I wouldn't be too keen to admit, I probably lived the dream through those people. You know, I get quite excited when they're racing, and I've got a young guy in Ginetta Juniors now, and he's pretty quick, and a few others. The young driver of the year, Keane Carey, he's going very well in Formula 3 in the UK. So you kind of get to work with those guys. You do a bit of PR with them, and hopefully they learn something. I mean, they'd have talent that I would never have had, but you can help them with a little bit of experience, life experience, I suppose. Yeah, probably, yeah, just getting older, happily middle-aged, isn't that what they say? Yeah, really. So
I'm going to do some thank yous. There is no escaping this, so here it goes. Adam Dolan, Ben Bialo, Bevan Brady, Bobby Smulders, Cameron Trussell, Chris Irwin, Colin Young, Dan O'Donnell, Davy Brown, Eric Welty, Eric Stout, Eric Matthews, Ivaldis Machuldis, Eduardo Kaftansky, Erin Bailey, James Langdon, Jason Hamilton, Justin Kinsella, John Rewalt, Kurt Anderson, Carl Hageman, Kyle Lyons, Kai Fearless, Matt B, Matt Brown, Matteo Fantini, Matthew Holmes, Matthew Rudy, M. Dosanz, Nick Ashby, Nick Osmond, Paxton Saunders, Philip Vossem, Phil Wildcroft, Peter Magnuson, Reed Bowser, Ricardo Aguilo, Richard Appleton, Richard Motes, QRST, S, Steve Redshaw, Steve Richards, Spiros Dimitriou, Scott Mayer, Truckosaurus, Zachary Yadamek, and Bibbs, who is the owner and the creator at the Lotus Forums, who has been, as he is to everybody, a friend. Thank you, guys. You know, it's starting to become viable as something, like I can start relaxing if this keeps going. I can start kind of really getting into it and not worrying about whether I can do it or not. There are 2 other people. The first is Andrew P. Collins at Jalopnik. He, I suspect, is what made that list of people possible. He wrote a very complimentary piece in the garage on Jalopnik about soup. So Andrew, I've been in touch and I've said thanks personally, but I just wanted to give you a shout out on here. It's only fair. And Dave P. Jaguar, who gave me a shout out on his channel. Dave does Jaguars and Minis. You can tell when you listen to this guy, he's done it before and he knows what he's talking about. He's also extended an invite to me to go out to Austria to, you know, do a kind of a skills swap and stuff. So that might be a big road trip. Dave, thanks a million. Love your channel too. It's great. So that's it. I'm not going to scrimp on acknowledging all of you. Every like, subscribe and subscription is as valuable as all of that. So, you know, thank you everybody. It's a bit of a landmark episode. I won't do this again if I can help it, okay? So I'm going to play you out with something really cool that happened at Mondello, we were also treated to some vintage planes. I went to have a look at them, and there was a vintage helicopter there too. Really cool stuff. And they gave us a flyby. They flew down the main straight. But there was one guy in particular, and he obviously feels if you're going to do a flyby, you're going to do a flyby. So this was really cool, and I'll leave you with this. And I almost forgot. Good luck.